I was sitting in my car outside H-E-B with 2 bags of groceries, sweating through the paper like they were nervous too when the Ring app nudged my phone. Motion at the front door. I thumbed it open without thinking. Maybe a package, maybe the neighbor's cat doing his royal rounds. And there she was on my porch, my wife, laughing under her breath with a man whose arm hovered too comfortably near the small of her back. She pressed a finger to her lips, reached up to cover the lens with that familiar, careless confidence. And before the feed smeared into the blur of her palm, I heard her whisper, "Shoo, he won't be home for hours." She forgot the driveway camera. She never parked on that side. He did. So I watched in the other feed as they crossed my field of view, 2 figures outlined by the Texas sun, moving like they'd practiced this. I could see the watch on his wrist, silver and loud, the kind of thing you buy when you feel both old and young at the same time. I didn't start the car. I didn't look away. I stared at the black rectangle of my phone after the feed cut, and in it I could see my own face reflecting back like I was a stranger in a shop window. I had bread, milk, eggs in the back seat, a rotisserie chicken cooling down, a bunch of cilantro I had no plans for because the bunch smelled like promise. Everything in the bag seemed stupid now, ceremonial, like I'd been shopping for props in a play that had already closed. I gripped the steering wheel and tried to breathe around a sudden hard knot in my chest. I didn't cry, nothing as clean as that. I made this quiet, ugly sound you only hear when something inside you pops. I called Marcus. That's the friend you call when you need someone to say the sentence you can't say to yourself. He answered on the second ring with, "What's up, man?" Like he'd been waiting for a reason to be useful. "I think Lauren's cheating on me," I said. The car didn't feel big enough for the words. I forced my own voice through my teeth. "I saw her walk in with a guy. I'm watching him on my driveway cam." He didn't fill the silence with pity. He just said, "Drive to my place. Don't go home. I'm serious. Come now." So I did. I put the car in drive like I was moving underwater, slow and exact, turned out of the lot, and let the AC try to dry the sweat climbing my spine. The city was doing its thing. People on scooters, dogs in bandanas, a kid licking a popsicle that dripped sunset colors down his wrist, and all of it felt like a lie. The radio played some summer song about never letting go, and I turned it off so hard I heard the button complain. On the way, a text from Lauren slid onto the lock screen like a snake. "Running late. Love you. Kiss Moose for me." She loved calling our dog by my nicknames when she wanted to sound domestic. I didn't open it. I followed Marcus's instructions like they were gospel because I knew if I deviated even a little I might do something cemented in a police report. Marcus lives in a simple 1-story place with a porch swing that complains but holds. He opened the door before I knocked, took one look at me, and didn't give me a hug. I didn't want a hug. He gave me a tall glass of water like I was a house fire and pointed to the couch. "Tell me exactly what you saw," he said, and I did. And while I did it, I watched his face shift through the same cycle my body had just churned. Disbelief, assessment, the sort of anger that makes your voice get soft, strategy. When I finished, he said, "You're staying here tonight. Tomorrow we make a plan. Don't say anything to her until you sleep." "Sleep," I said, the word scraped coming out. "Yeah." He pointed at the guest room, blocky furniture, a crocheted blanket his aunt had made in colors I would have mocked yesterday and could have cried over now. "I got you," he said, and turned the TV on to the low murmur of a baseball game so the silence would have to share the room with someone else. It's funny what your brain will do to survive. In the guest room, I lay on my back and the ceiling fan pulsed a soft, mechanical heartbeat, and all I could think about was the first time I met Lauren on a hot day that felt just like this one. 2019. I was waiting for banh mi from a truck with a chalkboard menu leaning like a drunk against a fence. She cut in front of me and then apologized and then made a joke about how she only cut when she had to, and we both laughed like we were proud of being the kind of people who don't cut. Her hair had this sunlit frizz she tried to press down, and her t-shirt said something self-deprecating about saving the planet by Friday. She worked in fundraising for a nonprofit that helped reentry program grads start small businesses. I wrote back-end code for a healthcare startup with a mission statement that read better than the Slack culture. We did late tacos after a late movie, and both of us tipped like we were still waiting tables because some habits you never want to grow out of. When a thunderstorm rolled in, we propped windows open and let the rain move through the apartment like a blessing. She told me her mom called her Lolo, which she hated, and 6 months later she let me use it because it sounds different when love is the one saying your name. We got married in 2021 in a friend's backyard under string lights we nodded and swore over. My mother cried into a napkin she pretended was linen. Her dad told the same 2 jokes 3 times each and everyone laughed like they were new. We adopted Moose that spring, a brown and white shelter mutt whose head looked 2 sizes too large for his body and whose ears did their own choreography. We promised each other ordinary things. Take out the trash, return the cart, call your parents, go to the dentist, tell the truth. We wrote our vows in the voice of people who believed we were discovering something nobody had thought of before. I promise to have your back when you're wrong, I said, and the crowd made that approving church noise. I promise to tell you you're wrong when it matters. She laughed and told me later that promise was hot and I believed I'd keep it with grace. If you backed me into a corner and said, "When did it start breaking?" I'd tell you late 2023, and not because one thing happened but because 20 small ones did. She got a promotion with a title that contained the word strategic, which is a corporate way of saying, you'll work twice as much and feel 2% more important. New donors, new events, new dresses that looked like they came with a room key. She learned a language that made compassion sound like a pitch deck. KPIs for kindness. Metrics for humanity. I could translate it. I just didn't like what the words did to her mouth. There was no big fight. Cheating is never as theatrical in the moment as it is in your head when you think about other people's lives. It's not champagne flutes shattering. It's corners of phones turned away by habit. It's a sweatshirt that smells like a cologne you'd never buy. It's girls' night, overlapping perfectly with no service, sorry. It's the way your name gets pronounced like it's somewhere down the hall, and you stand where you are because if you move toward it, you might see the door is already closing. I want to say I saw it and called it out, that I am a man of action, that I do not hide under the blanket of the word fine. But the truth is I liked that blanket because it was warm and old and it had our names on it. So when she tilted her phone away, I told myself we weren't teenagers. When she changed her password, I told myself everyone deserves privacy. When she smiled at her screen with that small, dangerous softness, I told myself she was looking at a dog video. After the Ring video, I tried to sleep and failed. My brain kept inventing scenes on loop where the other guy had the kind of face that ruins other men's balance. He didn't, by the way. I'd learned that later. He had the kind of face that forgets it's been forgiven. In the morning, I wrote Lauren a text that said, "Got called into an emergency deploy, going to crash at the office, don't wait up, kiss Moose for me." It looked like something I would write on any normal bad day. The words were a costume. She replied with, "Be safe, Blue Heart," and a picture of Moose snoring on the couch, his paws in a surrender pose, and the corner of her bare calf in the shot like a dare to the past. Then I did the ugliest thing I've ever done and would do again if I had to. I started keeping track. I became an accountant for betrayal. I collected data because data was a thing I knew what to do with when the rest of me didn't know where to put my hands. I called the phone company and pulled the call log details. Not content, just times and durations. One number showed up like a heartbeat, regular and rude. I fed it into a reverse lookup and got a name, Ethan. He was a development consultant in the same orbit as Lauren's job. A man whose LinkedIn used verbs like disrupt and adjectives like nimble, and whose smile said his dentist loved him. On the iMac we shared, I installed a cloud backup solution and quietly configured screenshots of her messages to save to a folder with a boring name. Nothing illegal. It was my admin login. It was my house. The messages trickled in like rain through a leak you thought was fixed. They were not all fireworks. They were often scheduling, what hallway to use at a hotel, which restaurant had a back entrance, what color tie to wear so the donors would think he owned fewer ties. But between the logistics were lines that sat in my chest like glass. "You make me feel new. You're my escape." He wrote, "You deserve the world," and I knew his world was just whatever room they were in. The part that surprised me in how much it hurt wasn't even the desire spelled out in emojis and shorthand. It was the relieved way she talked about me to him, not in gory detail, nothing disloyal to my body, but casual contempt about my habits, my slow mornings, my love for the same breakfast, The way I always put the remote back in the same place like I believed order was a promise and not a preference. Dad energy, she called it with a half-joke. He replied with 3 laugh-cry faces and a line about how she was too bright for beige. Every few hours my body would remember it could cry, and I'd do it so hard my eyes felt like sand. Marcus kept feeding me what he called sad tacos, and I couldn't get through one. The dog paced like he could smell a storm. I kept screenshotting. I kept naming files by date and time. I needed the math of it. Saturday with Lauren at a planning retreat. I was throwing Moose's slobbery tennis ball until his tongue lolled like a pink flag, when my neighbor Dolores leaned over our shared fence. Late 50s, hair the color of a good argument, coffee mug that always had a crude joke printed on it. "Saw your wife earlier with a man who's not you," she said, the way you'd say you saw a hawk in the pecan tree. "You okay?" "I'm working on it," I said. It sounded like someone else had borrowed my mouth to deliver a script. "Good," she said. "Don't do anything stupid. That's their job." Then she wrote her Wi-Fi password on a post-it and handed it to me. "Findy Orspine," all caps. She winked. I put it in my pocket like it was a relic. Lauren came home that night smelling like citrus and the backseat of a rideshare, kissed me soft, and fell asleep with her phone under the pillow as if that were Fort Knox. The phone wasn't the mistake. The mistake was the secret Gmail she used to share a calendar with Ethan. She'd logged into the shared computer days before and forgot to log out. I clicked, and there it was. Tuesday, 7 p.m. Board dinner, Hotel Van Zant. The event had no guests visible, no notes, but the capital letters felt like a whisper only they could hear. Tuesday came. I put on the blue shirt Lauren always said made my eyes look like the good part of a swimming pool. I told the hostess at the hotel restaurant I wanted a two-top near the ficus because I was surprising my wife. She smiled at me like romance had a uniform. I sat down and tried to keep my hands still and watched couples do the harmless little theater of being in public together. When Lauren walked in, she looked like an advertisement for success. Dress I didn't recognize except from the bank statement later. Hair done with an indifference you pay other people to achieve. Ethan had the tailored, just shy of smarmy look a man gets when he knows he'll never have to work outdoors. He touched her elbow like it was his name. They ordered oysters. I could not have invented anything so on the nose. He reached under the table and rested his hand on her knee, and she didn't move to remove it. They smiled at each other in the space you reserve for secrets and silent games. I felt a hole open under my ribs, and I put my palm over it like pressure could stop a bleed. I took one picture, not of their faces but of his wrist near her ring, of the way familiarity makes even hands look married. I texted Marcus. He wrote back, "Don't," in all caps, like he could see the scene I was writing in my head where I flip the table and deliver a speech that ruins everyone's digestion. I stood up, tipped the waiter who'd done nothing wrong a ridiculous amount, and left before the elevator doors closed on their night. Ethan had a wife, Jenna, kindergarten teacher whose class page had crayon rainbows and lopsided suns. They had a toddler with hair like milk foam and a name you give a child when you picture them on a library card. I found Jenna's work email and wrote a message I rewrote 5 times before sending. Because nobody deserves to be hit by a car when you could have braked. I said I believed our spouses were having an affair, that I had evidence, that I would send it if she wanted it and would disappear if she told me to. She replied in 30 minutes with "please send," and a choice of meeting in person because some things deserve to be confirmed face to face. We met at a Starbucks that smelled like burnt sugar and laptop heat. She arrived with a tote bag covered in paint smears and stayed standing for a heartbeat like sitting would be a concession. I slid the envelope across, dates, times, the single photo from the hotel, screenshots of texts printed in black and white so the emoji couldn't pretend to make anything softer. She looked through them, page by page, the way you read a manual when something has stopped working. She didn't cry. She didn't ask me to explain the parts the pictures already knew. She said, "Thank you," in a voice that sounded like it had taught 3 different groups of small people how to form a lowercase g today. Then she said, "He told me I was imagining things." "I'm sorry," I said, and understood I had been saying sorry to everyone this week except the part of me that had stood quietly in the stupid safety of denial for too long. "What are you going to do?" she asked. She didn't ask it to collaborate revenge. She asked like you ask a man on a burning balcony how he plans to climb down. Leave, I said, and the word didn't hurt coming out. It felt like a step onto solid ground from a rocking boat. Me too, she said. And for what it's worth, don't light yourself on fire to keep her guilt warm. She smiled at me like a teacher putting a gold star on a worksheet you thought was a failure. Men think they have to be noble while bleeding out. At home the next morning, with dishwater going lukewarm and Moose's nails clicking a slow metronome on the tile, I said, I know about Ethan. I said it without a crescendo or a dramatic flourish. Just a sentence with 4 words that rearranged the room. She stopped in the middle of the kitchen like someone had unplugged her. Then she tilted her head the way people do when they want to tell the truth without showing their throat. What do you mean? Came out of her mouth, and I watched it land between us like a cheap prop. I mean, I know, I said. The texts, the hotel, the calendar, the ring. I watched the algebra happen on her face, variables and outcomes shuffling, and I could pinpoint the exact moment she realized there was no remaining angle that kept the lie upright. She didn't say, it's not what it looks like. She didn't say, he's just a friend. She exhaled the kind of breath people hold in when they know they're jumping off the roof either way. I'm sorry, she said. She said it with an honesty that didn't come with a discount. There was a version of me from a previous life standing somewhere over my shoulder. A man who would have wanted to hold her when she said sorry, to pet her hair and say it's okay. I told that man to sit down. Why? I asked because the word was stuck in my teeth. Why him? Why like this? Why not tell me you were unhappy before you lit us on fire? I felt invisible, she said, and her hands went up and came down like a broken-winged bird. I felt like a roommate. I felt like we'd turned into this schedule. We're good at bills and appointments and taking out the trash and knowing who picks up Moose from the groomer, and we stopped being. She made that fizzy gesture with her fingers like sparks in the dark. With him I felt new, I said. Special. Seen. The clichés work because they do. I hate that you're finishing my sentences, she whispered, and I had to stop my laugh from sounding like tearing fabric. Moose leaned against my leg. He always leaned against me when a raised voice wanted to be born. I can't fix this, I said, and watched the truth knock something over in her. She began to cry, not the pretty Instagram cry, the kind of crying that makes your shoulders beg for a timeout. I love you, she said between breaths. And the part of me that knows how to hold complicating truths believed her. I believed she loved me, and she still did what she did, and both things can be true enough to make you a little insane. I believe you, I said, but you didn't choose me. She asked me, please don't ruin my life. I looked at the woman I had loved in 1,000 small ways and heard the public relations in her choice of words. I'm not ruining anything, I said. I'm stopping the bleeding. The next part was the part I'm proud of, not because it's noble but because it wasn't stupid. I did not throw her clothes on the lawn. I did not send the screenshots to her group chat. I did not film myself breaking his windshield like a high school villain. I called my lawyer. I froze the joint credit card that made both our lives feel like a convenient blur. I moved my half of the savings into an account that had my name on it and nobody else's, with paperwork neat enough that if a stranger found it on the sidewalk they could follow our life on a map. I kept everything, even when I wanted to light it all on fire, because a judge respects paper, not passion. I emailed her nonprofits board, fact-only, bloodless, a sentence about conflict of interest, a line about the consultant's relationship with a senior staff member, my concern about public trust. I didn't ask them to drop her in a well. I asked them to read their own policy with both eyes. I told myself I was doing it because it was right, and part of me knows it was right, and part of me knows it also tasted like an antidote. Then I called a process server named Joy, a name so on the nose I thought she was joking until she said, "You'd be surprised how often I hear that." She explained the options. I told her I wanted the papers served at a place where there would be no doubt the message had been delivered. "We can do that," she said. "We're polite but effective." Lauren's gala was Thursday. The room would be full of donors wearing their names like small badges of honor. She would be up there in the wash of light, telling stories about impact and community, all the ways we can hold each other up. Once upon a time that voice made me proud enough to clean up after every late night, to fold chairs with my back aching, to refill carafes and nod at strangers who thanked me for being her husband like it was a job with a pension. I wore a suit that made me feel like I had borrowed someone else's skeleton and stood in the back with the catered staff. Because that's where you stand when you don't belong and still have a ticket in your pocket. She was radiant the way people get when they're holding a mic. She had jokes. She had pauses that let laughter breathe. She knew how to look at the left side of the room and then the right and make both think they mattered. 10 minutes in, Joy walked down the center aisle with the kind of gait that says I am not here for the charcuterie. She climbed the 2 shallow steps to the stage, waited for a break in the applause and said, "Lauren, last name? You've been served," in a voice that was both official and oddly kind. She held out the manila envelope like a bouquet. Time did the thing time does when it becomes a liquid. For a full couple of seconds, Lauren's face stayed in performance mode, an expression that belonged to a person who could turn a stutter into a laugh and a kind of mess into a story that gets people to sign checks. Then the expression failed and fell, and underneath I saw a person who had forgotten that every choice comes home. She left the stage without theatrics, the room holding its breath, and I stayed exactly where I was. I didn't need the private scene behind a locked door. The point was made. It was never to make her small. It was to make what happened visible at the same volume as the illusion that covered it. The aftershocks came like aftershocks do. A flurry followed by an emptiness so quiet you can hear fluorescent lights. The board put Ethan's contract on ice and then on a shelf and then in the recycling. Jenna filed. I know because she texted me a sunflower and I understood it as the kind of communication people share when they've been in the same lifeboat for a minute. Lauren texted me 12 messages in 12 hours. A pendulum swinging between apology and accusation. I responded once and it fit on one line. "Please go through attorneys unless it's about Moose." Felt colder than I am. It also felt like oxygen. She came to Dolores's porch one evening to ring the bell and look at me through the gate like a person who has tried all other doors. "Why did you have to do it like that?" she asked. "You could have let it be private." She looked both angry and exhausted, which is a hard combination to pull off without a hangover. "You made it private," I said. "I made it true. There's a difference. You destroyed my reputation. You destroyed our marriage," I said. "Your reputation will mend. The internet has the memory of a goldfish with ADHD. Our life was supposed to be longer than a cycle. It isn't." She wanted me to fight for her. That was the line that almost made me laugh. I had been fighting for us for a year in the only way that counts, showing up daily, boringly, earnestly. I didn't tell her that because I didn't want to win this conversation. I wanted it to end. "Take care of yourself," I said, and meant it the way you mean it when you exit a hotel and remind yourself you're not responsible for the elevator. People always want to know about the dog, like the universe will be restored if the dog is okay. Moose is okay. His adoption papers have my name on them, the vet records too, the microchip, all the small bureaucratic ways a heart can be documented. I offered visits Saturday mornings in the park, a pattern that could build something like a routine if she needed it. She didn't take me up on it, and I learned the hard, necessary thing where you stop imagining why someone else does or doesn't and instead go throw the ball until your arm loosens. The high of revenge is a sugar rush. It hits and you can feel your cells clapping. Then your body remembers it's not designed to run on that kind of fuel. Then you're alone in a bedroom that echoes and you can tell the time by the light stripe moving down the far wall, and you realize the rhythm you built with another person lives in your skin even after they don't. I got angry at a sitcom joke and turned the TV off like it had insulted my grandmother. I yelled at a cabinet door for not closing right as if cabinets have loyalties. I apologized to Moose out loud, which is a thing dog people pretend they don't do and always do. Marcus told me to get a therapist because, as he put it, do not be the dude who tries to out-stubborn trauma. My therapist is a woman in her 60s who wears boots cooler than mine and has a way of sitting that makes you feel like your bones are a type of furniture. She told me my nervous system was waiting for another impact. She told me grief likes a route. She told me 2 things can be true and make you miserable. She asked me what I'd do with my time if I weren't doing the work of staying mad. I told her I'd run again. She said, "Run." So I ran. Badly, like a drum with a dent. I cooked an omelet that didn't stick, which felt like awarding myself a medal for domestic heroism. And I did the dishes right after because future me deserved to have a sink behave in the morning. I made the bed to make the room look like a place where someone lives who can be trusted. I stopped checking her social media after 3 days because I realized the only honest way to measure healing is looking at your own hands. I deleted the photo from the hotel because it was keeping pain glowing, a nightlight for hurt. When the divorce finalized, I bought a cake and asked the baker to pipe, "Congrats on your continued existence," in looping blue script. She laughed and then looked at me and realized I wasn't making a TikTok. I ate a slice on the porch with Dolores, who cursed like a sailor at her own tears. Moose licked the remaining frosting and sneezed like joy is hard work. Weeks later, I wrote Lauren a letter and then didn't send it because closure is a private ceremony. I apologized for not seeing how alone she felt. I did not apologize for leaving. I told her I was proud of the part of me that trusted her for as long as he could. I told her I forgave her the way you forgive a storm, which is to say you don't hold it accountable for being rain, but you build better roofs. I folded the letter until it was small enough to tuck behind a stack of winter sweaters. Sometimes I touch it without taking it out, like a man checking a scar to see if it's still there. I saw her again accidentally at the farmer's market 2 months after we signed. She was buying peaches like peaches had ever wronged anyone. She wore sunglasses that could hide a city. We did the awkward wave you do with the person who knows your dentist's first name and also the worst thing you've ever done. She said, "You look good." And I said, "I sleep." And we both knew I meant I do not wake up to the sound of a lie trying to get comfortable. She said, "I'm sorry." And she meant it in the small, clear way that doesn't ask for anything back. I said, "Me too." Because I am not for leaving, but for the waste, for the version of us that almost made it, for the way ordinary love can die from 1,000 paper cuts nobody bothered to bandage. After she walked away, I bought tomatoes I didn't need and watched a kid get face paint and listened to a man argue loudly about Basil like Basil owed him money, and I realized the world had kept spinning without asking me for permission. It was almost rude. It was also a relief. I took Moose to the river and threw sticks that sank, and we both pretended they didn't. He shook water all over me and smiled the way dogs smile with their whole bodies. And for a second there was no past, no future, just the clean present tense of a wet dog. Friends ask me what the revenge bought me, and I tell them it paid for my exit. Men in my family wear betrayal like a heavy coat and call it character. My grandfather stayed through 3 decades of cruelties and lectures and called it marriage. My father stayed until he was the only person in the house who spoke our last name without flinching. I could have stayed and collected points for suffering. I chose to leave and collect nothing, which turns out to be its own kind of wealth. If your father built a staircase to nowhere, you can be the one who knocks it down and calls the open space a room. There are nights I still reach for a second pillow before remembering I don't need to pretend to share. There are mornings I still make too much coffee and pour half down the sink with a stupid ceremony. There are days I pass the hotel where I watch them perform the kind of familiarity you can only earn in a hurry, and I feel nothing except a professional respect for the housekeeper who probably knows more about the city's secrets than God and keeps throwing sheets over them anyway. There are hours where I drive with the windows down because the storms in Texas teach you to honor the moments when the heat breaks. There are moments when I look at my hands and think, these are good hands. They built a life once. They'll build another. Sometimes I think about Ethan the way you think about a mosquito you slapped in July. A small, irritating reminder that your skin is yours and you get to decide who bites. I don't hate him. I don't forgive him. He occupies about as much space in my head as a dead battery. I don't think about Lauren as a villain either, not most days. I think of her as a person who wanted 2 different lives at the same time and picked the one with the shiniest lights. I think of myself as a person who wanted one honest life and is trying to build it with less talent than he hoped and more stubbornness than he knew. When I tell the story out loud, people lean in for the Gala part, the serving on stage, the manila envelope, the gasp. I understand. We all want spectacle to make sense of pain. But the part that matters lives in a quieter frame. The morning after, when I opened my eyes in a room that now belonged to me, and the dog put his chin on the mattress and huffed, and the light came in like it always had, and I got up. I put on coffee. I made the bed. I scratched Moose's ears until his back leg did that involuntary kick that makes both of us laugh. I sat at the table and wrote down what groceries I needed, not because I had to feed anyone else, but because I wanted to take care of the person who would come home later. I put bread, milk, eggs on the list and stared at those words a long minute, and then I added cilantro for no reason except it still smells like promise. Then I went to H-E-B, parked in the same stupid lot, walked past the same sliding doors, and let the fruit section hit me with that cold mist, and I picked out things that bruise easily and took them home carefully because we all do. We take home what can bruise. We try to carry it steady. And when we drop it, we learn how to clean the floor.